believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Renz, also known as Ricky Variance, and a great episode for you today. Today, we have returning guest, somebody who's a regular on the Ripple Effect Podcast and a regular on the Union of the Unwanted. She's a researcher, thinker, philosopher, host of the very popular Mel K show. Of course, we have Mel K, and she's a fan favorite. People love her. She's outspoken. She's strong. She's fearless. And that's one of the reasons why we love her too. And she's always a blast to talk to. And I don't think I've ever told this story on a podcast before. Maybe I have. But I remember during 2020 when we started doing the Union of the Unwanted and we started asking some of the same guests to come back on over and over again. And we kind of created a little bit of a community and a friendship. And Mel might not know this. And she might not even listen to the intro of this episode, so she might never know if I never tell her. But Mel and I had some conversations, and I don't remember if it was on her show, my show, if it was not during a show, if it was on the Union of the Unwanted. But we had a conversation about what was going on in the world, how much we needed one another in regards to the alternative media community to stay sane, to help each other figure out what's going on, to gather research, to just also support one another, because we were supporting many other people, the listeners, the people all around the world who were surrounded by people who were buying into what was going on and needed to hear other people say it out loud, needed other people to remind them they weren't going crazy. And I think a lot of us content creators and podcasters did that for many people all around the world. That's why sometimes I get a little down on myself in regards to people contributing to content creators. I'm constantly dealing with it and hearing from other content creators that they're dealing with it with just a lack of financial support. And of course, like I always tell you guys, there's many people out there who can't support financially. And if you can't, don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel bad about it. Don't worry about it, because there are listeners out there who can contribute financially and are in better financial situations. And the thing about me is that I sacrifice a lot of mental energy, a lot of preparation in my full-time job, a lot of downtime that I could spend maybe thinking about something that is work-related or planning ahead. I spend all my free time thinking about this podcast and thinking about who I should have on, which topics are important, which guests are important. How do I have important conversations? And that means that a lot of my personal finances are being sacrificed. And I got down on myself. Sometimes I let the seed of doubt, and what I mean by doubt is kind of the seed of doubt in regards to doubting if I'm on the right path or if I'm doing the right thing. Because I do think about, like, okay, financially, would my family be in a better place if I had less to focus, less to think about that wasn't work related? And this stuff happens because it's like, of course, everybody wants to not live paycheck to paycheck, or not to stress about financially the future and that type of stuff. But we also want to live a life of purpose, and we want to do something that's fulfilling and something that is more valuable than money, something that is more important than making money. And sometimes doing what you love will pay the bills. But until then, there are sacrifices that need to be made. But sometimes that sacrifice doesn't seem worth it, right? Like there's times where we're tired, we're stressed out from our full-time jobs, we're stressed out with just the everyday responsibilities of being a adult and a parent and a worker in the workforce and having a full-time job, and it can be overwhelming. And to find the time and energy to still create content because in your heart you feel like it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you're gonna have days where you're wondering if why you're even doing it. And this brings me back to Mel, because sometime during the last couple years, I remember she probably didn't know it, but I was kind of really down on myself in regards to, I'm like, the business is barely surviving, and some of it is uncontrollable because of the COVID lockdowns and lack of supplies and lack of employees and all this other stuff, and the price of materials going up, which, we're still dealing with all these issues. But some of it is also because I blamed myself. I thought, like, if I was focused just on my job and I didn't have all these extra things to worry about or to juggle, scheduling guests for the Union Unwanted, scheduling guests for my own personal show, all the things that are required in having a podcast and putting out shows on a regular basis, that maybe the business would be doing better, which also means maybe my family would be doing better, and maybe my wife and I wouldn't worry so much about money. And as many of you guys know, growing up, that was always a issue with my household. My parents were Portuguese immigrants, and I came to Portugal when I was young, or came to America from Portugal when I was young. So money was always something that we talked about, something that we stressed out about. So I tried to live my life thinking about it as little as possible. But as times have gotten tougher for everybody, it becomes harder and harder to do so. But Mel, she would constantly remind me how important what we're doing is, and how this is possibly one of the greatest times in history, in human history, in regards to fighting back against tyranny and fighting back against, the global elite, or whatever term you want to use, and that nothing else is more important than this fight at this moment. And to me, it's what I needed to hear. I needed somebody to remind me. I needed somebody to tell me that I wasn't going crazy, that I haven't become obsessed with this battle, and I've convinced myself it's more important than it really is. And now other things are being neglected for unjust reasons. And I think those conversations are important. That's why I can't thank the listeners enough. So many listeners who reach out to me and give me positive motivation, because there's a lot of times I have those moments of doubt. I mean, this episode with Mel is quite a few weeks old. I typically will put out shows no later than a week or two after it's recorded. This is older than that, and it's because I've been just struggling to juggle things. And I'm happy that I'm caught up. I'm really happy that I'm finally caught up. I went a couple weeks where I did a lot of shows, recorded a lot of shows, but didn't have time outside of recording them to do all the other work that's required to upload it and edit it and do the intros and thumbnails and descriptions and links and all that stuff. So I'm glad I'm caught up. I'm glad that people like Mel are always giving content creators like myself a little bit of positive motivation. Mentally and emotionally, people like her are awesome to have around, because they're the people who give you just positive energy and positive motivation. And sometimes we need that, just like the listeners needed to hear from us that they're not going crazy, that things didn't make sense, that the experts were lying to them, and they're not the only ones seeing it. And so I think in many cases we all help each other. And yeah, so I just want to say thanks to Mel, and thanks to all the listeners who do help me, even if unknowingly they help me when I'm a little bit down. This intro has been super long, and I still have some sponsors I wanted to let you know about. Of course, if you want to donate to the show using PayPal, you can. You'll find the links in the show description or find all the links on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. I also have a Patreon page, and I do a podcast with my Patreon supporters from time to time, typically once a month. So it's coming up very soon. Sign up on my Patreon page to join us on the next Patreon podcast. And I have a merch store. Please, guys, check out the merch store. All the stuff you see me wearing during the shows, during the You Unwanted, during the Ripple Effect podcast, the mugs you see me drinking out of, that's all stuff you can find on the merch store. So go to the rippleeffectpodcast.com, click on the merch store link, and check out all the stuff we have. Please check it out. You can watch the video episodes on Rockfin, which is a video platform that has tons of free content, including all the Ripple Effect podcast video episodes. And just by watching on Rockfin, it contributes to the show, and you can also tip the show on there. So if there's an episode that you really connect with, you really like, you can tip those specific episodes. Other sponsors are Content Safe. Matt Raymer at Content Safe created my website, built my website, runs my website. He is awesome. He's been a lifesaver. When I got kicked off YouTube, many people would be stressing out, and I was a little bit, because I knew that Google would also suppress the show, which they have, and I think it's without a doubt contribute to the slower growth than expected throughout all these years, especially when I got kicked off YouTube. The show was growing at a really quick rate and then slowed down quite a bit. So thanks to Content Safe, he helps put all the videos on all my video platforms that I'm on. So Rumble, Rockfin, BitChute, Minds, I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple, Odyssey, Float, plenty different platforms, and it's all thanks to Matt. He saves me tons of time, so I can't thank him enough. If you're a content creator, if you're looking for an IT guy, website builder, anything that has to do with software or IT and content, please reach out to Matt at Content Safe. Let him know you're a listener to Ripple Effect Podcast. He'll take care of you. Also, Element Electrolytes. Use the link on my website or in the show description. It's electrolytes you put in water. Many of us are dehydrated. You don't know it. You don't realize it. But many of us are dealing with fatigue, muscle soreness, from headaches, all because of dehydration. And many of our hydration options suck. They're options that are full of sugar or carbs, or if they don't have sugar, they have some cheap artificial sweetener. So check out Element. It's only premium ingredients. It has no sugar. It's sweetened with stevia. It's good for you. It was created and formulated by Rob Wolf, who is one of the most respected people in the paleo and keto movement, and somebody who's been on my show and many other much larger shows. And he's been in documentaries. He's written books. He's done a bunch. So he really knows his stuff. So check out Element. Use the link, and every time you use the link for your purchase, you'll get a free gift. So check that out. You can also check out the University of Reason, which is by Richard Grove, the host of Grand Theft World and many other podcasts, and been a part of the alternative media community for a long time. One of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And the University of Reason is a great place if you're looking to take a new career path, if you're looking to expand on some skills or learn some new skills. Please check out the University of Reason. You can help yourself and help the podcast at the same time. And then my music, of course, Theory 6 is the artist, which is just me. It's my solo project. And you can find Theory 6 music on all the places you can find music: Pandora, Spotify, iTunes. And you can also find the link on my website. And the song that you hear in the beginning of the show, which is the theme song, it's called The Ripple Effect. So if you look up Theory 6, the number 6, and then The Ripple Effect, you'll find it. It's also the name of the EP, which that song was on. And then I can also get Bitcoin and Ethereum on my website. You'll see the addresses there. So if you're interested in sending Bitcoin or Ethereum, please check out my website and send me some love if you can afford to do so. If you can't afford to do so, rate, review, subscribe to the show on all the places that the show is available. And that goes a long way, and it helps fight against the algorithms that are absolutely suppressing these type of shows and conversations. So thank you so much for listening to me in this very long intro. Thank you so much for listening to me throughout all these episodes and all the the episodes that I'm on my game, that I'm off my game, because there's plenty of those too with all the stresses of life. It's hard to sound perfect and be perfect and not be the not so perfect human that I am and we all are, and we're all working on it and trying to do better. So that's the goal, of course. Thanks, guys. Enjoy this conversation with the amazing Mel K. Check out her show. I'll put links in the show description, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
How's it going?
Good. Just busy Friday.
Yeah? But you're always busy.
Yeah. I try to be. It's funny because I talk a lot about it on the show, about how you try to overcorrect, right? Like 2020 was so like everything we wanted to do was stripped away from our lives. And so
Right.
let's get right back into it, being busy. And then it's like you can kind of go too far in the other direction, where it's like, now I'm glad I'm busy and trying to utilize as much time as I have on Earth to like do things and experience things. But if you're moving too fast, and you're an East Coaster like I am, you're in Massachusetts, it sometimes you move too fast that you don't even you don't give yourself time to enjoy the moment or take it in.
Yeah, I know. And that's been a big difference this last couple years, at least for me, because I spent most of it. I took like a Patriot road trip all over the country. And that's what we did, because I didn't want to stay in New York City, and we had the ability to do that. So I traveled basically on the road, and it was like, you realize just how much is out there, and like how much I've been living in like this. Either when I was in LA or in New York, you're so stuck in a box, and then you realize like America's awesome. It's giant. There's lots of place to go. We don't have to stay in New York City, sitting here waiting for the world to change. There's plenty of great America out there. So that's been a real eye opener to me.
Yeah, it's funny because growing up, so I was born in Portugal, as I'm sure my listeners.
Right, I know.
And so in growing up, like the typical vacation for me was we went back to Portugal in the summers.
Right.
And
it's so nice though.
Yeah, it is. But like it almost became one of those things where it's just like, you know what? There's a lot of places in the US that I haven't, like, people look at me like, oh, you've been, you're from Europe, you go to Europe, like they think it's a big deal. And then people talk about going to wherever, like all these beautiful
Mexico.
Yeah, well, just all these beautiful places in the U.S. and it's like, no, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen. It's like, wow, like there's like I'm literally flying over the ocean,
Right.
and while there's like tons of beautiful places I could drive to in the U.S. and
Yeah,
tons of
but
amazing.
your kids are so young. At some point, you guys can go on like the master America road trips. Where you like we did that with my family. So we like drove all the way up the East Coast, and we flew up to the West Coast, drove all the way down the West Coast when I was a kid. So there's so much you can do here with your kids. So
Yeah, like today I was so I do road construction, and today we're down a guy, so I was out in the road, just working, in the heat with the other guys, which I actually enjoy doing more than doing the office work. The office work can be, I feel like we're designed for physical stress, like it feels good when you're sweating and you're out
right.
there, but we're not designed for like the mental stress that I think a lot of us live through every day. But one of my employees was talking about how he went to Niagara Falls, and he's like, have you ever been? And I'm like, no. And then he's like, really? He's like, I'm like, no, I really haven't. Like, I went to Cape Cod for the first time this year with the family. My wife's like, you never been to Cape Cod? I'm like, no. I'm like, I went to Portugal and I came back. I'm like, that's it. That was my life. Like, I didn't like all those childhood experiences the average person had. I'm like, my parents were foreigners. Like, we went to like one beach that like, I don't know, one
Every year for your whole life.
Yeah. We went to the same, like everything.
So you'll get to learn with your kids.
Yeah, well, that is a very good point, actually, because to be able to experience it with the kids together,
Yeah.
might make it, even more special. But he was talking about how, and he's actually Guatemalan. He's from Guatemala,
Oh, wow.
and he's like Niagara Falls. He's like, might be the most beautiful place on earth.
Oh, wow.
He's like, I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, you got it. He's like, and he's like, there's so many people there. He's like, and it's just like, so it made me think, and it kind of, what we're talking about made me think about that story, because it's like, it's awesome to go to Europe, see castles, and there's a lot of history there. But like you said, there's tons of beautiful people and beautiful things in the US. I did go to New Orleans for a bachelor party once, and I loved it. I mean, the people were so nice. It was more like my style of people, like
Yeah,
slower. They actually want to talk to you. We're like New York. Like I have family that lives in Long Island.
right.
And it's like they get so mad when I say this, but I'm like, New Yorkers are rude. I'm like,
Yeah, no, it's true.
but it's not on
It's true. But
purpose.
also, it's so crazy because we would always try to find like the like local place wherever we'd stop. So we'd go and we'd sit at the bar so that we could talk to people. And it's just amazing. Every state is so different. It has like it's totally its own personality. I realized over time I could tell immediately when we were in a new state, even without knowing. I'd be like, oh, and it's crazy from it's amazing. I think Colorado, and we drove Colorado, Arizona, through New Mexico, Texas. I went to Nashville, Alabama, like places I would never go, Memphis, everywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, I'm a big bourbon guy, so I've always wanted to go to Kentucky
Yeah.
and
Oh, that's great down there too. We went through Kentucky,
oh, did you? Nice.
Kansas. I've been in 22 states.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what we did the entire because I could do the show on the road, which I did a lot. And we go and we speak, we tour with General Flynn, but we also go to like smaller things. So I had a lot of friends that were running and have been running, are running still. So we would like go to Oklahoma and then Nevada. It's been fun.
Well, you also realize like, well, one thing I want to hit on because something that you were saying, and this will lead us back into probably some of the topics that we're going to discuss. Something that you were saying that is concerning, not what you're saying, but how we're going to lose some of what you were talking about and sharing. This idea that every place had its own feel and little restaurants and
Yeah.
culture and all that stuff. Going back to Portugal, and I haven't been in quite it. So once I got in my teens, I stopped going. My parents would still go, but then I got caught up with like dating and
Right.
music and being a teenager, and so I stopped going. But like my parents have said it, and many others have said it. Like now you see Mickey D's around every corner. You see a Burger King, you see a Starbucks, you see whatever it may be. So, and you see it here too, where like before you used to
Yeah.
go. Every town had like, oh, let me try out this coffee shop, or let me try this breakfast place. Let me try, it had, but now you're starting to see like just and that's where 2020, that's another issue that we would talk a lot about is how small businesses actually seem like the popularity was going up quite a bit. Like before 2020, like I feel like people were really making an effort to go to a local mom and pop restaurant compared to the,
Right. So do I.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that was also a problem for those who would like that not to be the case, as we saw here. But no, when you do get out into the rest of the country and you get out there, these small towns, they're like little microcosms of, and that's what I talk a lot about the republic, that we're a republic, because every state should take back their state pride and their state story, and every state should have its own borders, language, culture of that own state as it's supposed to be, because I'm telling you, it's undeniable when you drive from when we drove, like, say, through 5 states, you can immediately tell that you're in a new. It's just I feel like there's just its own personality. It's amazing. It's really, I think it's beyond our control, that it's just every state has its own like whole flavor. It's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and they have their own identity. They have,
Yeah.
and I'm like you, where like anytime I travel, I look for the like hole in the wall mom and pop place. I don't want to go where the tourists go. I'm like,
Me neither. I think it's so much fun. But that's when you realize most people really love our country and are proud to be Americans and all of that. A lot of them just don't want to deal with politics, don't want to deal with this. They've been terrorized for 2.5 years. They're done with it. But the problem is that, that's a double-edged sword. So, but most people in this country are not what the mainstream media is telling us. Most just want to live their lives, raise their kids, have their small business and be left alone.
But you're right, and unfortunately, that's why the crazy people are the ones who end up getting in power,
that are deciding everything. Exactly.
Yeah, because the most of us are just I want to be left alone. I just want to raise my family. I want to do my passion projects. I want to have my hobbies. I want to go to work, have a safe environment for myself and my family, and
Right.
And then next thing you know, while we're just moving along and kind of enjoying life and being productive, crazy people get in the office.
Yes, yes. Yeah, but the big problem is that we have to, I mean, I had such a good childhood. I didn't think so at the time. Grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, so I was always like, I got to get out of here. It's the worst. But now when I look back, like a lot of my friends actually went home and live in that area and still go to the Jersey Shore where we went at my age. And it's like, I want your kids to have the same freedom and the same, running around outside and all of that. They're trying to get rid of that. And it's like, that's what being a kid's about. It's like, I want the children of the future to have like a childhood. This is crazy how fast they're trying to make these kids grow up and get right on the internet and all of that. It's hard to be a parent right now. You really have to push back, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point because they're also trying to get kids at a young, and not that I'm against kids at a young age being politically aware or motivated or
Right.
stand for something and doing research and wanting to be knowledgeable. But the problem is with kids is that they have energy, they have passion, but they lack wisdom. They're very easily influenced or motivated in one direction or another. Peer pressure is a real thing. I mean, you see it with I saw with like local events, if there was like a festival or whatever, it was always like a group of kids wearing masks. It wasn't just one kid, it was always a
Right.
group, like whatever the group was doing. It wasn't because of a health, it was because of like, oh, that's what, and we all lived through that. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I was a metalhead growing up. I was Portuguese, then I kind of rebelled and wore Slayer shirts and Metallica shirts. And everybody in my group, we thought that we were trying to go against the grain, but
Right.
we did was like not join one clique and start our own clique. We're still in a clique. We're all still trying to look alike and dress alike and be cool in our little clique. But yeah, the thing about kids is that they're easily persuaded in one direction or another. And then once they have more time than adults, so they're the ones who can go to protests. They're the ones who can spend all day on the internet and make a huge mess of things. And the cancel culture is all mostly younger people. Older people,
Yeah.
that's why.
I've done a lot of research into it though. What's scary is when we were young and picking cliques or, I was like a theater person. It's like weird. And I played sports and stuff, but I was very into that. And you find like your place where you fit in. Right now, what's really happening, in my opinion, with this, it's an overall, it's global. It's not just in America. And if anyone thinks that what's happening with our teachers unions is in America, it's not. It's actually worldwide, and it's really more the UN agenda for education and Common Core. But there is an aspect to it where this is unprecedented. This is not what happened with us. These are adults that are being put into K through 12 schools. They've hired more counselors and group leaders and administrators into K through 12 in the last few years than they have teachers. And I think what we're having though is like a kind of a confusion type. I believe that because what I talk about is the puppet masters, but I feel like we're having a thing where the kids are being manipulated. They're not choosing their groups because that's where they fit in or don't fit in. I really think that the kids are, because I've had a couple people on, especially one woman from Los Angeles who her kid was like kind of ostracized and bullied and stuff, and they had Planned Parenthood has counselors in the schools in California, and she went to a counselor because the mom called the school and said she seemed very depressed and she's saying she's bullied. So the counselor talked to her. Next thing you know, she's part of this LGBTQ transgender group where they accept everyone. Next thing you know, she thinks that she's the transgender. She wants to change her gender. Next thing you know, she's coming home. She wants to be on puberty blockers. And meanwhile, then eventually she realized that she didn't want to do any of this. But through the progress was what really came out at the end of it. The mom realized, like looking through everything, that she was being indoctrinated into something. And it's not just that crew, the LGBTQ, it could be any group, but it's more that there's adults being like, well, go here. This is where you'll fit in. There's just a lot of manipulation, I think, from adults that shouldn't be that shouldn't be what they're doing. But it does seem that children are being told that they should be part of some kind of collective or group in order to feel good about themselves. And I think it's the opposite. We really have to start pushing, no, who you are as an individual is most important, and staying true to what you believe, or they also don't want you to take what you're learning at home from your parents, especially if there's religion involved and all of that. There really is a push in our public schools to indoctrinate people into groups. And I think groupthink is a really bad thing, especially for young kids.
Well, they're anti-religion, except if you're all about their religion. Scientism, materialism,
Right.
their isms are okay, and that's a huge issue. I mean, the thing with having two little ones, it's bothersome because, like you said, is this happening everywhere?
Yeah.
And race, gender, these are not questions that my kids are asking. I've said this on the show a bunch of times. I mean, my kid's best friend in school was Asian. His best friend outside of school, who actually lives up the street from us, is mixed race. My kid never cares about, doesn't care about any of that. He doesn't see one kid as a Asian, another kid as, he just sees him as like his buddy and his buddy, like his friends. Like that's it. Like
Right.
they play. So it's the same thing with the gender thing. There are kids who are lost, or are kids who are confused. And I was one of them. I was depressed when growing up. I didn't know. And it's funny because everybody calls me Ricky because I didn't want them to call me Ricardo, because I was trying to hide that I was a foreigner. Because when I first came to America, I was learning English, and I felt, I just want to fit in.
Right.
And so I felt like that. I felt like, okay, I don't fit in. Where do I fit in? Who's my clique? Who do I identify with, or whatever? And as time went by, you figure it out, and you go through different stages in life, and that's okay. And then you're going to figure it out. And there's going to be things that you're humiliated about. Like, I can't believe I wore that, or I had that, or whatever. But
Right.
But the thing is, so when there's a kid who needs a little bit of guidance, it's okay to help them out. But what they're doing is they're not helping confuse kids. What they're doing is they're confusing kids who aren't confused. So you're taking a kid
Right.
like my son or my daughter, who never ever think about what gender they are,
Right.
never ever think about what race somebody is or what culture they are. If anything, they're maybe intrigued with it,
Right.
it's new or different. My kids have said that. I have friends who are Lebanese. They do Ramadans, right? And they're really close friends of mine. And they call him Uncle, because they're that close. Where and you're like, oh, well, so what does Uncle Robbie do? He does Ramadans. What is that? And so it's they're intrigued with it, and you explain it to them, and then they're like, oh, that's cool. That's they're learning something new. That's the way kids are. Now, what you're doing is you're taking kids and you're confusing them, because now you're like, listen, I know you haven't thought about gender, but you could be a girl, and they're like, wait, what? Could I? Maybe it's you're literally planting the seed, and that's the part that's, if there's a child that is asking these questions organically, then that's
Right.
But it's not organic. What you're doing is you're literally planting the seed, and you're causing the issues instead of fixing issues. And
Right.
and like you said, kids, I mean, it's so easily to sway kids in one direction or another. I mean, I can convince my kids of different things. I could, just convince them, no, you shouldn't have ice cream today after dinner.
Right. Right.
Anything.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, maybe daddy's right. Maybe we should, so it's and those aren't important issues. So what's scary is that parenting has now become okay for the state to do. So parents are not taking the responsibility in their own hands. I see these parents of kids who are, maybe confused with gender or whatever, and they're all excited that the school, the teachers got involved, and that the school is getting involved, and and I'm like, no, that's your responsibility. If my kids have any serious question or answer, or question that needs a serious answer, I'm like, I want them coming to me, because
Right.
what ideology that teacher is, and I'm gonna not push any opinions on them. I'm gonna have a discussion with them. We're gonna expand on some ideas. We're gonna talk about it. These teachers could easily be planting seeds of their own identity on these kids, pushing their ideologies onto them. And it's as a parent, and I say this all the time on the show, even for myself, I feel for myself, I look at life as a huge puzzle, And like everything that I learn or discover, every experience I go through, it's like one more piece to the puzzle. And I know at the end of my journey, I won't have all the pieces, but I'm going to try to gather as many as possible. So, and then at the end of my journey, maybe the image becomes a little clearer. Well, the kids are obviously, children are doing the same thing. And I
Right.
want to help them get those puzzle pieces. I want to help them mold a perspective on the world and the universe and the way they look at things. I don't want a stranger doing it. And their intentions might be in the right place, but their perspectives and opinions might completely go against what I believe. And it's like, I want to have it. So it's like this, and I'm just getting worked up because just like you, like this issue is just, it's so bothersome. There was a great video, and I've talked about this before, with Megyn Kelly and Bill Maher on the Bill Maher show. And you have somebody who's from the right, somebody who's from the left,
Right.
both talking about this exact issue. She had to take her kids out of a private
I
school.
know.
They
Here.
were, yeah, in New York, exactly. And then they were even looking for other options. And she's like, it was happening everywhere, every
Yeah,
school.
everywhere.
School.
And the crazy part is it's happening everywhere worldwide. I have a friend that just came back from Italy and Ireland, and same thing is happening there. This is a worldwide agenda. And I think the hard part is that it's easy to look at it from your local, what's going on locally. But this is a much bigger picture, because if you really do look at the funding of the two major teachers unions and listen to what they're saying, they're full on, this is Marxist indoctrination. And that's not a conspiracy theory. You just have to look at what they're saying, what they're doing. This isn't new stuff, but it is very it is much more geared towards taking the parent and the religion and what they learn at home out of the child's life in a way that's I think, very manipulative. And I think that it's also about the dumbing down of our children. I mean, this has been going on for decades, but now we have, since Biden came in and his education secretary, and they've really reorganized a lot of stuff to go with the globalist UNESCO. We know right when Biden got in, he announced that he was going to team up with UNESCO. UNESCO is the world education started by the other Robert Mueller. And then it evolved to Common Core with Bill Gates, who has Common Core all over the world. And then now they have this thing I'm sure you've seen things come home from school, where they're really pushing this social emotional learning, which basically says, everything's debatable. There are no science, facts, geography, whatever it is, that's not as important as how somebody feels, emotionally about things, or how they identify. And what's happening, if you really start to look at some of the statistics, is they're taking the job that we thought we were sending our kids to school for, which was to teach them reading, writing, math, critical thinking, reading comprehension, geography, science. And that's really taking a back seat. And the sad part is that it's not just on the K through 12 level. We now have a situation where colleges are getting rid of any kind of standards in terms of getting in terms of grades, in terms of SATs or whatever. And they're basing it on external features and, quotas or equity or, and it's just really, I think, raising a generation of very confused kids that won't have, not that it hasn't been happening for a long time, but the skills that they're getting at their schools, which is why millions of people are now actually figuring out how to homeschool, will not serve them in the future. But if you're me, you think that that's by design, because I believe the people that have captured all of our countries and, don't hide it, the bankers and the Davos crew, that they want compliant people who will be happy with their universal basic income and, the government controlling everything, and the real creativity and the ingenuity and the entrepreneurship that comes with the basic teaching that we all grew up with will not be the main thing anymore, because their fourth industrial revolution and how far ahead they are with AI, I don't think people fully understand that when Klaus Schwab and Harari and all these people talk about that they won't need people, or they won't need that many, because the fourth industrial revolution and the Internet of Things and all of that will replace humans, the need for humans. You really have to look at it and be like, well, maybe I want my kid to learn everything so that they are creative and are entrepreneurs and do set out on their own and do critical think. But I really think that there's a concerted effort to create future generations that just follow orders. I that's what I see right now. Follow orders, and everything's debatable, so nothing's real. Everything's debatable. So
except science, except their science.
hey, trust the science, for
Yeah,
God's
I mean, everything's debatable except the science, even though that's actually the most debatable
Right, exactly.
topic ever. I mean, science should be the only thing we can all agree it's constantly being debated and should be constantly debated, because nothing debunks science more than science itself. People are constantly figuring out that they misunderstood something or whatever.
Right.
So it's wild. We're living in a crazy time, and it's like baby steps in a direction that people don't realize we're going to. And that's the thing. It's like there's such baby steps. It's no different when like the 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It's like you try to tell someone when they first start proposing this idea of like, hey, maybe we should shut things down for 2 weeks. Try to tell them then that it's like, hey, they're going to try to vaccinate everybody. You won't be able to go to work. You won't be able to make a living. You won't be able to go to work unless you have this vaccine. By the way, a experimental, never once approved for the public mRNA technology that we have very little understanding of, never been approved. It's going to have the emergency authorization. And by the way, even when you look around and life looks normal, they're still going to have emergency authorization, even though it doesn't look like we're in an emergency. And we're just going to ignore all that. And that's going to be one of the end games. And people would look at you like you're fucking crazy. They're like, well,
I know. And look at it now. I don't even think they're even done. They're going to take this as far as they can go. I know in New York, well, first of all, in California, they're already telling kids in San Diego County, in that county down there, that they have to wear masks to school this upcoming season. I have a lot of friends have kids about to go to college. They're all saying that they have to be double vaccinated and boosted. And in my unions that I used to work in, SAG and the Writers Guild, you have to be fully vaccinated with boosters to work on any set in Hollywood or in film and television in New York. So it's really, they got rid of 60,000 military. Well, they're already making our military weak and sending everything over to Europe. And being very woke with our they can't even get cadets. It's down 40% of people that would want to serve. But what they're teaching in school, who wants to go into the military and protect a country that they're being told is awful and systematically racist and all this. It's a real problem what we're seeing in terms of morale and pride. I have a friend who's a third grade teacher, and she said she watches the kids get up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. They still do it in their school. I know a lot of private schools don't, but they do. And these kids don't even know what they're talking. It's like, she said, it's sad. You watch it and they couldn't care less. They don't have any pride in America. They don't feel like, it's a good country. And then I saw just came out, there was a poll, and it said that most 24 and younger, it was for most of them felt like the United Nations, which to me is the Fourth Reich and the biggest fraud humanity has had to deal with. But these kids in America that were, I think there was like 2,000 polled, which isn't that many, but they did say they think the United Nations would do a better job at running America than our own government. I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you. We got to all just keep talking and keep fighting. And I was saying on the Union of the Unwanted, because you dropped off the other day, I said, it's so funny. 2.5 years ago, it was the Union of the Unwanted, but it's slowly becoming the Union of the Wanted, because people don't want to hear the other stories. They actually want to hear what the people you gather have to say, because it's starting to make a lot more sense than what they've been believing all along. And people are waking up a lot quicker than they used to, I think.
Well, I think the importance of the Union of the Unwanted was because it's funny because that show was it was a lot of work, like gathering everybody and all. But I remember it was funny because I remember I used to think about what you told me one time. You're like, what you're doing is because I remember I don't know if I was talking about work, because the business got neglected a lot the last couple of years, because I couldn't think about work with probably similar to you, where like knowing all these other things are going on. And I'm like, I can't focus on work when I know, like, my kids are being brainwashed.
Right.
We're getting harmed by a experimental vaccine to stop the spread of a virus that's harmless to 99% of people.
Right.
Like all these things were going on, and it hit home. So, I want my kids to be able to play sports without wearing a mask. I want my kids to go to school without wearing a mask. I want, it's like it was hard to focus. And I remember like you saying that once, and I'm like, yeah, fuck work, because I'm like, who cares about work if the world's going to shit? I'm like,
Right.
I need to, keep doing what I'm doing and keep focusing. And the popularity of the show, I think, grew, the You Don't Want to and the Ripple Effect podcast and your show and many other shows. I think the popularity grew because, one, I think people were seeing that we were right about a lot of stuff because a lot of stuff we predicted was happening, and two, I think people like the stuff that they neglected for so long because like you said, most people want to be left alone. They're good people. They want to be left alone and they just want to live their lives. But unfortunately, there's things going on and there's agendas and there's people who are going into places of power and have their own agendas for while they're there. And there's corrupt people everywhere. So you can ignore all that stuff, but eventually it's going to have
you can only ignore it until you're where we are right now, where you don't have a choice anymore. Because I've been talking a lot. There's a couple people out there that I've debated because we have an election coming up and we know the elections are all, and it's not just the Trump election. We can go back to Bush. We can go back to whenever. I'm very friendly with Kathy O'Brien, who was around when they brought in the machines in the 70s. It was always about manipulating it. A lot of Laura Logan has a documentary coming out with my friends the Thayers called Selection Code, and a lot of our politicians, regardless of what people would like to believe, like I was saying on the show, they've been selected, and not by us, but there's enough manipulation of the masses that you think that that's really what's happening. And for me, what I've learned, especially over the last 2 years and helping a lot of candidates that I believe are, will bring back law and order and the Constitution and our, borders and help our kids with the education. But I'll tell you, I don't think that there are two parties. And I think it's unfortunate that we're stuck in this, this fraudulent, I believe, paradigm that that I think there's a uniparty, and I've watched from both sides. I know candidates trying to break in that had real lives. They went through the COVID and they said, I'm going to run for office and make a difference. I know ones on the left, they just feel like the progressives and the Marxist, communist, socialist wing of their party is a nightmare. That's not who they are. I have a couple in my community right here, LGBTQ, they have their own little group where they feel like this whole transgender and going after the kids is not what they fought for. So that one of my friends in that group is running. And then on the right, there's a bunch of people running that are constitutional people, like America First people, but not necessarily Trump people. But the GOP is as bad as anything else. These people don't want anyone new in. And it's on both sides. There's a total uniparty and they protect each other. And what I've learned is that, with both sides, the GOP doesn't want anyone new in. They want their status quo, and the DNC doesn't want anyone new in. And I frankly believe that it's because if anyone new comes in and actually does the job that they're telling the people they're going to do, well, a lot of criminality and corruption would be exposed. So they want to keep the status quo. But I do hear a lot of people saying, like, what's the point of voting? I say, like, well, what's the point of voting is that they have both of these extremes, extreme right, extreme left. They have the voters. like that's not who we got to come from we're Americans that are from all over the world, all creeds, colors, religions, whatever, but we're voting for what's best for America, regardless of left, right, center. I just think it's all such a fraud. And it's like being cheering on a team like the Eagles versus Dallas when I was growing up, it's like, that's what they have us doing. And I think it's totally fraudulent, but we can't not vote because then the people that they control on both sides will be the only people that have a say. And I think 2022 is very important to get in some people from the outside that'll start opening up the books, especially in the States. So, for anyone that isn't going to vote, just remember, if you don't vote, somebody's voting for you, and it's probably not the way you want.
Well, I think the electoral vote, even though I think in theory I get why they did it, it doesn't make any sense. I'm in a blue state. my vote doesn't matter. If I want to vote, red, it's not, there's not enough people to change, to sway this state in any other direction.
Right, I'm in the same. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in it. So it's just so I think that's one of the things. Like it's like they should have a popular vote, and really count that. I think, just personally. I mean, I could be wrong, but it just seems like, I mean, even though speaking of popularity, I mean, Biden had more votes than Trump
And Obama.
which is crazy to me.
Come on.
It's like,
But here's the thing. The crazy thing is that anyone says that there was not cheating in the election. There's been cheating in the elections for decades.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, what do we? It's just so insane.
I say that all the time. Like, you lose credibility if you say it's not fraud in this past election, because what you don't understand is they're always fraud. The only difference, like, what we should be talking about is how much fraud and how did it sway the election one way or another. That's a different conversation.
Right.
But you're saying there's no fraud. Like, I'd love to know if you had the same perspective when Bush and Al Gore were running.
They didn't, and that's what I keep saying too. I keep saying, but it's going to come back to where it's your team. Exactly. Get off the teams. That's why I say I wish we could get rid of the Republican and Democrat parties completely, all of the PACs, all of the lobbyists, all the external money, and actually have a way that your vote really is your vote. And that you can track that vote that you voted from doing it through eternity. And I think this paradigm of two parties is so. I think it's always been about manipulation, because once they get in there, they're all on the same team, except for like 10 guys that are in DC right now. Still seem, and they don't seem to pick sides. One of them, I think, is Rand Paul, who's always coming out, because I loved his dad, so I always watch what his dad has to say. But he's always coming out like, but wait a minute, where is the money in Ukraine going? $50 billion. Oh, we don't know. Where's the weapons going? We don't know. At least somebody's asking, but it's very rare. So to me, it's like, I think we have to figure out how every individual person, forget parties. It should really be about the individual person having so much pride in that their opinion matters, that they not only do their research on everyone that they vote for and don't vote by party, independent, Republican, Democrat. They actually look at who. I have it on my website. I have a free resource page where you can look up basically anyone running in any county, and you can find out where did their money come from, who's funding them, and if they're in office, what have they voted for in the past. We should really, if we want to fix this country and the whole voting system, we need to fix it. And I think that starts with the individual saying, I'm going to look at everyone that's running. I know we don't have the time, but we do have the internet now in other ways. It's not like the old days where you had to like look them up in the phone book, go find their yearbook, and no, you can find all that information. I think it's really about an informed and an engaged people. That's the only way this is going to be. I don't think any of these parties, I think they're all criminals. The amount of money that it costs to run, and then the amount of money coming from the outside, because I did a whole thing on Arabella Partners and 1630 Project and all these people putting in, and on both sides, hundreds of millions of dollars into elections that they're not even in that state, should be illegal. I just feel like we got to take this all back to the local level and to people saying, I'm not part of a party. I'm part of my group and my family, and like you and your wife are like, okay, we're a voting block. We don't need to be a part of your team. I think that's the only way we fix this, is really taking back the pride in what it means to have a vote in this country.
Yeah, and be an independent thinker, like you're saying. I mean, the problem is once you join, like, it's like, oh, I have to. Why do you have to register for any?
I don't know. It's so ridiculous.
Somebody proposed the idea of like not even putting, or no, you know what it was? It was a friend of mine who has a podcast, Ronnie, who I think it was Ronnie in Finland, said that they don't put a D or.
Oh yeah, I was on that.
Yeah. Right. So maybe it was Ronnie who said that there wasn't
right.
Somewhere where they don't put like which political party the candidates in, so you're forced to have to like know who they are.
Because, right. Like I think that's what we need to do here. I honestly think both these sides, because I had a bunch of friends that ran. I went up to Chicago to speak at a friend that was running, and you look at it and you realize like the amount of money being put into only two people are going to be in it, but I'm talking about on the primary level. This amount of money is so grotesque. It's such a waste. I don't even understand. And then when you start to look into like also the K Street, the lobbies, the amount of money that is wasted on these elections and the running, and then they're running again. They're always running, so they know they don't really care about us, you know. I just feel like the people have to say enough's enough. We don't want to play this game anymore. I guess it would be very difficult because, you know, we keep getting like they select whoever's selecting, and then we get to choose between whoever they selected, and we think that we have a voice. And I think we only have a voice if we do actually take our vote seriously, every single person, and stop playing by their rules. They're you know. And the other thing is, in primaries, independents don't have a vote. I think the independents are the most important. Independents should be able to vote in primaries for anyone. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Then you're stuck after the primary with these two people. You didn't, and most people don't pay attention to the primary. Then you just have these two people you get to choose from, and they're equally always corrupt. So, you know, but we got to do something.
I'm a huge fan of Ron Paul also. I had a bunch of music that I wrote before, and I think even I forget what the song was, but I remember I sampled a bunch of Ron Paul. Like,
cool.
Because he was so right all the time. I mean, he would talk about wars. He would talk. I remember the one speech one of the speeches I sampled to him talking about. He's like, you know, something about like if the American people only really understood why we went to war,
right?
You know, where all that money goes. And I mean, we're sending money to Ukraine, billions of dollars. We're spending, we're paying $6 a gallon for gas. You know, most people can't even afford to get to work and come back. I mean, their whole income is going just to get into work.
I know.
So they can make an income, and yet we're just blowing money away like it's nothing. It's a, you know, like I said on the Youth Unwanted, and I think I said on the Youth Unwanted, like when you're on a plane, you're supposed to save yourself first, because you can't save anybody else if you can't save yourself first. So you put your mask on first, and then once you're healthy and safe enough to help others, then that's what you do. It's like you're sending money overseas, and first of all, that whole war is BS. Anyways, we all know, you know, that it's not the way that they're proposing it.
No.
They've been poking the bear for a while. They knew that if they kept pushing, a NATO East, that eventually Russia was going to have to, you know, something. And so, you know, it's all nonsense. And then it's like, you know, and then unfortunately, the Ukrainians are a pawn in a bigger game. And
they're being used. It's really sad. What's saddest though, what I think was the hardest for me to watch happen was it went right from all the same people that were like, you know, wanted to kill the anti-vaxxers and were so like too mass, and everything Fauci said was gospel. And, you know, I saw it in New York, the people that like couldn't wait for Cuomo's daily briefings, you know, and even to this day, some of them are still wearing masks and getting their kids on their second booster. But I'll tell you, that same exact group that followed blindly science and our government, which they don't know history if they think the government is the safest bet for your health and future, but overnight turned to hate and ostracize and reject the Russian people, the Russian, you know, art, Russian athletes, Russian music, Russian culture, Russian. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm watching this happen. It's the same exact people, the same news. I happen to have some people that are overseas that had sent me in real time debunking a lot of the stuff that our media was telling us and showing us from Ukraine in real time, from there, being like, no, this didn't happen that way. And the Azov battalion are Nazis, and this is going on, and it's you know, and it's been going on since 2014, and that. But it was the rabid cancellation of the Russian people that I was like, what is, first of all, the Russians helped us in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. So, you know, the history of what people believe about Russia is not in America, is totally, like we've talked about before, history is written by the victors. Well, now I'm questioning, who are the victors? Because the history we got is not even close, basically, to in my estimation, after looking in it. But really watching the American media and the, like, what we're told is the majority, turn on an entire people, not on the government. It wasn't about Putin. It was like everything Russia was canceled. And I'm thinking, Ukraine is the most corrupt, the poorest country. And I had done early on a real deep dive on a different show about, and somebody else's show about the Metabiota labs and the labs all over Ukraine that the CIA and the Pentagon are funding. They put them in there when Obama went in, before he went in, when he was a senator, he went over there. But, you know, they have those labs there. It's a huge human trafficking, child trafficking hub. We had the whole Burisma thing. You know, we have all this stuff. We have the impeachment with that weird embassy that nobody could make out of anything. I've learned a lot, which is really, really sad and scary, about like the IVF farms and baby making labs there. I mean, a lot is going on in Ukraine. And then on top of that, I'm sure, I know we've talked about it in Union and the Unwanted. Ukraine, right after we had the biggest coup in the open ever that the United States sponsored with George Soros in 2014 with John McCain and Victoria Nuland and her husband that was running NATO and Clinton and everyone, and then all the Burisma stuff. But you know, they took a loan from the IMF for $5 billion back then. And that loan basically can never be paid back, as we know how the IMF works. And therefore, you know, people should be asking who is running Ukraine, because it ain't that guy. And he's also a World Economic Forum young leader and a billionaire and was an actor. But people should know that in 2019, he made a big speech to Davos and the IMF and everything about all the investments people could make in Ukraine, and kind of proposing that it be the example. I guess they were losing Astana, but the example of the Build Back Better, Green New Deal kind of utopia. And he's talking about all the contracts that they could have to totally change the grid in Ukraine, and that they could do all this technology. Now they're talking about testing weapons, but our CIA and Black Ops have been in there since 2014, building up their weapons. And suddenly our whole government in lockstep sends $50 billion there. Then 425 million to NATO, which to me, NATO is the one world government's military that's pushing the whole plan. And then another 100 million that they just took of our taxpayer dollars to pay the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian military. And isn't anyone in America at this point in our government going to be like, enough? And even CNN says they don't even know where the money's going, and the weapons are being sold. They're going into Ukraine and being sold right out of Ukraine. So, you know, I think we're being greatly deceived, but I don't even know if that money really exists. I mean, what do we do? I know it says it does, but where's that going? It couldn't. If each state of the 50 states got just 1 billion, we could do a lot of cleaning up. So.
Yeah, it's well, that's the thing. Like, we don't know where the money's going. We don't know who we're funding. We don't know who we're helping. It was like when we were sending weapons for the moderate rebels in Syria. I'm like, moderate? I'm like,
right.
Is questionnaire that you give them, like, hey, before we give you this AK-47,
right,
ask you a couple questions. Would you consider yourself moderate or extremist? You know, it's like it's so silly. So what, you were just literally giving weapons and using these terms of like but the problem is, our, like you were talking about, Common Core in our school systems. Like, I never got brainwashed in school because I never paid attention. So
right.
But like the average person, they still have this illusion that like experts mean something. And if you're on TV and you're a politician, it's because you care about the well-being of the public. And if you're a doctor, it's, you know, you're not motivated by money, you're motivated by helping people. Like, all this like just worldview that's completely wrong, because the truth is much scarier and much darker. So ignorance is bliss. It's much better. You're better off just kind of seeing the world in that way. And you know, so and what you said about Russia, that was, you know, that was the part that I also was like, I mean, I was stunned by how nobody said what you said. Like, hey, if you don't like the Russian government,
right,
everybody who is Russian, how do you know that they agree with the government? When we invaded Iraq, when we invaded Afghanistan, when we were getting involved in Syrian stuff, when we're bombing people in Qatar, like, I'm in America. Guess what? I'm not okay with what my government's doing. And there's many people who agree with me. So they don't represent the people. So the idea that you're punishing every soccer team who can't be, I mean, people who, I mean, and think about it. If you're an athlete, a lot of these athletes aren't even politically aware. They're not don't know anything about history. They don't know anything about politics. If you're a elite athlete playing for, a top soccer club in the world, in Russia, Moscow, wherever, or playing in the US, whatever sport it may be, like, you've been focused on your craft and getting better at that. You haven't been getting involved in politics, and
Right.
now you're being punished for some scenario that you had nothing to do with. You have no part of. You probably you're not even aware of all all the little details about the situation, and yet, like, we act like Russia's the most evilest of people, even though a lot of people, like you said, they don't know that, like, even World War II, they lost more people than any.
Yeah, 50 million.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
without them, we probably wouldn't have won. Let's
right. And the other thing that a lot of people don't put together is that the USSR only broke up in the 90s. Everything that we're dealing with, Ukraine didn't even have borders till 1994. And but those borders were made by the UN, Clinton, Yeltsin, and all these other people. And I'll tell you right now, the border that they made with Ukraine kind of purposely made it that half of that whole area, that Donetsk region and Crimea, that those were Russian. I mean, for centuries, these are Russian people. They are loyal to Russia. They speak
I
Russian. Russia is their history. And suddenly, after Obama and his clan, Soros and the whole crew, and Biden, and we know what happened in 2014. And if anyone doesn't know what happened, they should watch Oliver Stone's Ukraine on Fire, because it's the best, to me, most succinct way to understand what we did, we the United States and our CIA, which has done it all over the world. Yugoslavia, you brought up a bunch of them. That these wars were never what they were told to the soldiers, let alone to the people. I was talking to somebody earlier about all the propaganda and everything that was needed to convince the people, just like happened here with Ukraine, but with Vietnam, with Iraq. A lot of this was PR. It was created. It was total, like, straight up propaganda to convince us that these wars were justified. And you find out, 10, 15 years later, well, we're finding out in real time that this war in Ukraine is not only not justified, but I fully believe it's part of the Great Reset. The whole Klaus Schwab, if you read all of his stuff, which I have, because I cannot believe that this is real and that people stand in the room at the World Economic Forum and clap on camera with what they're actually saying up there. This Harari, I can listen to him for hours because I can't believe that somebody is saying this. And a whole room of people, including Joe Biden and a lot of celebrities and Obama, are clapping. They're clapping for the one world government, and they do know it. I mean, regardless, but this takedown of Ukraine, I think it's part of the whole thing, because if you really look at what's going on, the other side of it is that the US, I believe, was broke. I don't think a lot of people know that in the CARES Act, the Biden regime, they put in a lot of money to, apparently, a lot of federal and private pensions were empty. And a lot of this money has been laundered and disappeared. We spent $100 billion in Iraq, 80 billion in Afghanistan. Most of that money went to our military industrial complex contractors. And I believe that's what's going on right now. It's a little disturbing when you look at the history of Austin and other people. Austin was on the board of Raytheon. But you also have to say, where's this money going? Well, I think it's going to contractors, just like it did in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it made a few families, always the same ones, very, very wealthy at the expense of we the people. But I also think that there's a financial crime going on that is trying to be covered up on a massive scale internationally. And that's where I tell a lot of people to really look into certain people like Fink at BlackRock, who's on the World Economic Forum, great resetter, the ESG score guy, also runs BlackRock, CEO here, that owns 90% of our companies, are publicly traded companies, but also these pensions that they deal in. I believe that they were looting these pensions, and part of this whole process. If you see Fink, he comes up on stage, says the Ukraine war is going to end globalization. But if you didn't read what he says after that, and I believe that guy Fink has more power than anyone in DC right now on the global stage as far as America goes, because of his place on the board of the World Economic Forum. But he said Well, the war in Ukraine is going to speed up the central bank digital currency, the turn from fossil fuels, and the build back better plans, basically from inside out. Well, you planned it, so I guess that is where we're headed. But people have to be a little more cognizant that it's a very small group of people, but this is a plan, and real people are dying that are innocent because these people. I don't think they care. I don't think they care how many casualties they have, as long as they keep the power in this very small, very. People think these are billionaires. These are trillionaires. These people, they first of all, they don't pay taxes because it goes through all their foundations and stuff, and then they put them overseas. But we've got a small group of people, and they don't hide. And I think it's very clear that we have an oligarchy running America, and our politicians work for them and not for us.
Yeah, the crazy thing is there is a plan, and the plan's pretty public. You can hear these guys talk, like you were saying. It's mind-boggling. I remember talking about September 11th, and like how it was really like scaring everybody was really just for the purpose of getting people terrified enough to do something that didn't have any logic behind it, and it worked, right? It's like, wait, why are we going to Afghanistan? Why are we going to Iraq? Oh, that's right, because of terrorism. And we're so afraid that, that's why they had the anthrax attacks. That's why they had the constant code red, code orange, all that stuff, because they want to put you in a constant state of fear. And then it's like, you're so emotional. You're like, okay, I just need this to end. And if you're saying going overseas and blowing up some country that I can't find on a map is okay, then okay, let's do it. But they had PNAC, they had Project for a New American Century. It kind of documented this. You look at Brzezinski's The Grand Chessboard. There's so much evidence that this stuff was so well planned. I mean, it was like when Event 201 was circulating, that video, and people are like, oh my God, we couldn't prepare for this. That's why we have to lock down, because there's no way of knowing. And I'm like, no way of knowing. They literally recreated the exact scenario. I remember showing people that scenario, that video, during the lockdown, and people are like, this isn't a new video, this happened before 2020. I'm like, yeah, late 2019. And they're like, no way, I can't believe. They're like, literally, it seems like it's something just documenting what's going on right now. The way people, like the way the news were scaring people, the uproar, all that stuff, to pushing the vaccine. I mean, the skepticism with the vaccine, all that stuff. Like, they literally knew this was all going to happen because they already recreated the scenario. So this idea of like, we just don't know. Who could have prepared for this? It's same thing with who could have predicted 2 planes hitting the towers? And then we find out there's documents at the White House saying, Al-Qaeda thinking of flying planes into the towers. So it's like, it's so, and then the same thing with like the Great Reset. The Great Reset is just a conspiracy theory. Or you can read the book that you can buy on Amazon. That
I know.
It's like it's a conspiracy theory that you could buy it on Amazon, and the author openly discusses it at conferences, talks about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, talks about all these things.
Transhumanism, melding. But there is, the guy says up there on the stage, humans are hackable animals. There is no free will. They think that they pick who they vote for, what they buy at the supermarket. No, we pick it. And then the Harari guy saying, no, it's all about algorithms, and we control the algorithms, so we control the people. I mean, he says stuff like this. They mean it, and they're farther ahead than that. And the other thing that you're saying that is really, people have to really pay attention to is they don't hide it. But here's the good news, I think, that I'm seeing. I love Charlie Robinson. I know he's like your partner but he makes me laugh so much. But we always talk about how they're so arrogant that and right now, here's the great part. They've really done a number on our universities. It's before COVID. I thought, well, growing up, it was like, the goal was to go to an Ivy League school, the best school you could, I used to get punished if I got like below a B, because like the whole goal of like my upbringing was to go to the best school you could to become something, and I live in New York City also. So a lot of people I thought were the most brilliant of my friends here, they went to Harvard or Yale or Columbia, they work at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs, or, they're professors at NYU or whatever. These were the most easily brainwashed people during the pandemic were these people. And I started to really look into it. I now call it the poison Ivy League, because now I'm pretty sure that this class of people, and I'm not talking about, they really lowered the standards, a lot of stuff with the equity and all that. But there are people that go to these universities. But if you really look into Harvard and really look into like Sharp and the color revolutionaries and all this stuff that's gone on, Kissinger and Klaus Schwab and Weiss, they're all Harvard guys, and you look into this stuff and you realize, like, and especially with the bloodline family types that are generation after generation in these schools, they made a mistake, because I think that they really dumbed down a lot of these universities and made them Marxist training camps and stuff. But at the same time, these heirs, the people that have been groomed to take over for Klaus Schwab and Kissinger and Soros and all their kids and stuff, they're not that smart, like the first generation, like Brzezinski, and because they actually like Brzezinski and Kissinger and Sharp and all the people that were in that first crew, the UN, One World Government, Rockefeller acolytes, they walked slowly. This crew is going so fast that you can't not see what they're doing. So there's a mixture of not being as smart, not being as strategic, obviously not being as educated as the generation above them that's handing them the New World Order mantle, and their arrogance and their greed and their the way that they have like these events where they all like clap for each other, and they go in their private planes and they talk about what they're going to do about those humans, and it's like, it's so in your face that it's laughable, because at the end of the day, there's probably about 3,000 of these people that are actually pulling the strings. And I'm talking about the Bank of International Settlements levels, bankers, and the IMF and the World Bank. But then obviously Davos, UN runs Davos at this point. Davos runs the UN and CCP, of course. But we're at a place where it's a small group of people, and the next generation of them aren't so smart. So I still have a lot of hope that they don't even have the ability like their predecessors, and the architect, I believe, of it all is Kissinger for Rockefeller. But I don't think they have the ability to pull it off, and I think that's very good for humanity.
Yeah, there's Kissinger. I know there's a lot of young people listening to this. You should read the book or watch the documentary, The Trials of Henry Kissinger. It's it really documents. And another great book is War is a Racket by Smedley Butler.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, you find out that like literally all foreign policy is always based on a lie.
Yeah.
Basically almost all policy is based on a lie. And so there's another great documentary called Promises and Betrayals, and it's about World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire and all the all the conspiracies that went into that, and
Right.
And how they got all the people who were, a lot of them were living somewhat peacefully during the Ottoman Empire. The Allies went in there and like promised like Saudi's land and this land and that land, and then betrayed everybody. And then it was really, because that's another part of history, like you were talking about borders of Ukraine. A lot of people don't realize like a lot of these countries were created after World War I, and like
Right.
after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And a lot of times, and then there's that Sykes-Picot agreement where the French and the British decide like, we're going to have influence on these countries, you're going to have influence on those countries. And and then they have all these like little proxy wars, and everybody's just a big pawn in a bigger game.
Right.
And
Yeah, and it always goes right to the same people, because the same people have been funding both sides of every war. And we are at a point where it's not even deniable that it's. A friend of mine said to me one day, we were working on something, and he goes, "So you're telling me the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the Bank of International Settlements, and CERN are all within 20 miles of each other?" And they were, in Switzerland, that we were all told was supposed to be neutral. These are the people running the world, and it's not just them, but it is. And then we have the City of London and the Rothschilds with the Bank of International Settlements and City of London and the whole model with Rockefeller. We got this vassal state in DC. We've talked before about the Vatican. It's like, it's such a small group of people that have decided that they are bigger and more important and more. I call it the Fourth Reich. I don't see what else you can say about it, but it is the problem is, I feel like this generation that's coming up, that's our age, that's taking the lead, is not nearly as, they're just not as educated, not as strategic. They're really, I think a lot of them don't even really want to do it. You see a lot of these people, if you go through some of these families that have, with their foundations, and you got them all, the kids didn't do so well in life. And it's just coming more and more to a place where I see what they're doing, because they talk like they got their one world government already. Because I don't know if you've talked about it on here, and your audience has gone this route, but this public-private partnership that they talk about, and the stakeholder capitalism, the whole thing from Klaus Schwab, is really about that the multinational corporations boards, in cahoots with all the banks, which in America, I think that the most powerful financial person is Fink. But what the point is that would be the power structure, and all of our governments would somewhat be enforcers and babysitters. And like, if you think our vote doesn't matter in their one world government, our government's vote doesn't matter. And they are trying to implement this through the corporations and through the banks, especially with this ESG score nonsense and all of this. So, I mean, that's something else that people have to really watch out for, because that is another place that we can win the battle, is by realizing who's in on it, and stop even if it's more easier for you to, go to these corporations and buy from them. And you have to understand, these corporations are all involved. It's the same people, and they are trying to usurp our country, I think, through the corporations and the banks. So we don't even realize it while we're looking at the government, thinking that that they have the power. And I don't think they do. Not now.
And the crazy thing is, they keep convincing us that we need saving from ourselves. Like, humans are the worst thing ever. We're racist. We don't treat people nicely. We don't care about spreading
the planet.
We don't care.
We're purposely, it's the multinational corporations that are pushing the ESG, that are funding all the stuff that might be, hurting the planet. And then they act like it's like you.
And the greatest polluter is the military. Nobody pollutes more than military. And yet they, which is crazy. And it's like, you're okay with like feeding our kids GMOs and aluminum in our everything, and back, the Marisol used to be in vaccines, and there's still aluminum in, like, they find it like some metals in like formula, right? They do some like really just sketchy testing of their own formula, and some of them just stop testing. But so it's like, you guys don't care about the environment, you don't care about any of this stuff, and then you point at us and say we're evil, the world will be better without us,
right?
And you save us, government. Hey, you big, big corporations, you big government, like, hey, you guys all work together and then figure out how you can protect us from ourselves. It's like, and all that. The thing is, it's the middle class gets screwed. It does. Like, I always, growing up, I always just say, I'm like, one party helps more the rich, another party helps more the poor. The middle class gets screwed by everybody.
Yeah.
But
I think the pandemic was an attack on the middle class worldwide. And the reason I think the middle class is such a problem, middle class are the entrepreneurs, the middle class are the small business owners, the middle class are the people that actually will fight for their children and for their country and for, what is right to the best of their abilities. And the middle class is also the most free thinking, because they're not, whether you're very wealthy or very poor, you're still being controlled. If you have that much money, you're being controlled by the club you're in, because that's how it works. If you're that poor that you're living off the government, they're in control. The middle class is I just feel like the whole pandemic was a takedown worldwide on the middle class, because the middle class causes the most problems for those who would like to control from the top down on a globalist scale this country and the world. And the other thing that's sad that we talked about a little before is I read a lot of foreign papers, because I feel like I've narrowed down like 10 papers worldwide. Actually, one of them is Portugal, and but they're English language papers in that country. And if you look at a bunch of different papers and they all kind of have the same facts and story, then you can kind of figure out, well, that's probably true, and then start looking into that. But the one thing that is, the American people should know, not only are the Ukrainians and NATO not winning in Ukraine, and all that money is being laundered, but more important is the rest of the world is looking at America in a really bad light. The sanctions, I believe, everyone involved in the banking cabal in America, especially, but worldwide, they knew those sanctions would backfire. They knew that those sanctions were going to hurt America and the EU the most. And people that do know what's going on knew that the BRICS nations, Russia, India, China, had already planned for this to happen. It's as if they all knew. It's now people say that are scholars and talk about what's going on from the Russian perspective. They say that they knew in 2014 that the next coup would be to try to, through color revolution, take down Putin and Russia, and that Russia and China had been planning since 2014, knowing eventually they were going to use Ukraine to start World War III because they would need another war. And that Russia's been working this whole time on being ready for when that happens. So when the sanctions hit, and we're seeing it here, and they're acting like on our media, everyone in the rest of the world knew that the US and the EU were going to be devastated by the sanctions. And that is what happened. And the rest of the world really is looking at America like, how do they have a senile president that's running that country? Why are they starting wars all over? Because people need to know, we're right now in Yemen. We're in Syria, we're in Somalia, like all these places they've re-injected themselves, or I don't know if they ever left, but the rest of the world really is not looking good, looking at America in a good light right now. And it's a shame because it's not we the people. We don't even have a say about any of this, but it is true. And we don't want that. I really do think if we could get these people out, the people I call like the puppet masters, and really tear it out from the core, from everywhere as best we can, and actually, because I think that's the real problem over the last 100 years, at least, is that all these tyrannical governments, they only seem to go away. Like I always say, Germany might have lost World War II, but the Nazis didn't. They went through Operation Paperclip, high jump through Argentina, right into America, through the UN, all over. But a lot of those Operation Paperclip people also went to Russia. Like they didn't end. The Nazis just went underground and reinvented themselves. In my opinion, the highest level would be the United Nations, but now we're watching the Davos crew. But I do think that it's too obvious if you just put together the dots what's going on here, and that it's up to the free people of the world. But the people in America really have to understand that we are losing our standing as a country that has a lot of respect. If we already have whatever we had left, but this with the sanctions and what's going on in the Ukraine, and the rest of the world knows what's happening. It's only our media and our government that is doing this, and the EU, which is in on it. But the rest of the world is watching this and thinking, why are NATO, which is now synonymous to the rest of the world with the US military, they want World War III, and the whole rest of what I'm seeing is the rest of the world thinks it's us.
Yeah, Russia's actually doing quite fine in this war. They're actually not harmed at all. And while we're paying more in gas prices, and not just gas prices, everything has gone up. So I don't think we're winning in this. Two guests that, if you haven't had them on, that would be great. Gerard Williams, he's been on my show a few times. I remember the first time I had him on, it was kind of very against the grain to say that Hitler made it to Argentina, and he was one of the first researchers from BBC. He actually was a BBC journalist, wrote for a bunch of different publications, eventually ended up going to Argentina on a different story, found all these books written in Spanish, documenting all these.
Oh, I gotta find him.
I
did a lot of digging into Eichmann, who went to Argentina, and the current Pope is from Argentina. There's a lot went on in Argentina. No, that guy sounds great. I'd love to talk to him.
He's and the cool thing is, like, he's not a conspiracy theorist. He was a guy who was just a journalist, wrote for a bunch of best-selling authors, so wrote for a bunch of different publications. He's from the UK, traveled all over the world, and he just happened to be in Argentina. And it kept coming up that people were saying, no, yeah, we know that he lived here, he made it here, and then that
he died in a car accident.
I'm trying to think. Is that what he might maybe?
That's what I think that's what the last time that I watched documentary. But who knows? I mean, the truth is, this is the problem: is that we don't eradicate evil; we just let it get away. It seems because that's something else that is going on in Ukraine, and they didn't deny it in 2014 and 2015. If you even look at the New York Times and Washington Post and other places, they talked about the Nazi battalion that was never brought to justice in Ukraine, unlike the Germans could supposedly, if you then you hear all the stuff about Argentina and Operation Paperclip and Hajj,
You're
but the
program, right?
Nazis in Ukraine, they kept breeding. They didn't. It's and it, and that is part of what we're dealing with now, but people don't want to believe it because the news says it isn't true.
Well, you can Wikipedia NASA, and then when you find the founder, okay, which is Van Buren, you click on him and then find out who he is. And so it's like, if you don't believe in Operation Paperclip, I'm like, that's a pretty easy way to find out. And he was a Nazi German, and I don't know, have you had what's his name, Michael or Mitchell Gerber, the guy about the organ harvesting and CCP?
Oh yeah, I've talked to him. Yeah, I'd like to reconnect with him because now I found all this horrible stuff about they have like baby making factories. This is so bad. You and I have talked about it with like Epstein and John of God and all that. But apparently there's these IVF, they're full on labs, factories that they are making GMO fetuses in these factories. It's going on in China with these they call them like artificial wombs, but apparently this is also a big business in Ukraine. And and I did do a deep dive, and it is a fact that not only do we have bioweapons labs there that would not be allowed in America, that we are funding all over Ukraine, but Hunter Biden was one of the original people to put money into it. So, there really is just so much going on in Ukraine. I just feel terrible for the Ukrainian people, but this is what they do. They go in and we've watched it, and we the people don't really know because thank God for alternative media and what's happened now. And honestly, Ricky, when we started, when I met you guys, people still were watching the media. It's really at this point, if you're watching MSNBC, especially if you're watching every night and being told that, like, if you're a white, Christian American, that you're a white supremacist, like from that Joy Reid, or the way that they speak, you can't even believe that this is allowed to be said in America. But if you were sitting there listening to everything CNN and MSNBC are saying, and Fox News, look, I'm not a fan of any of them, I got to tell you, then you are not getting the truth about anything. Like it's at a point where, but apparently only 11% of people actually even watch that stuff anymore. More people are probably watching your show than are watching Joy Reid's show, and that's a fact. It's a fact.
Yeah. It's it's the thing is, shows like ours, they do well and people are looking for alternative news sources, but the problem is when you're force feeding them the narrative on all the big tech platforms that you would typically be looking for alternative platforms, you're kind of screwed, because then they're all they're doing is, you go on YouTube. Back in the day, I could go on YouTube to find alternative researchers, thinkers, alternative perspectives on whatever was going on in the world. Now I go on YouTube and I get the same mainstream video. That I'm trying to run away from TV. I'm not watching TV because I don't want to see Fox News, MSNBC.
Right, me neither.
I must give Tucker a lot of credit. I got to give credit.
He's the only one, really.
He's had a lot of people on that have been on my show, and
yeah.
He went against the grain a lot. I don't know how he's getting away with it, because
he goes as far as he can, because I've seen some of those contracts when I was younger of what they look like. He can go as far as he can. He knows a lot more than he says. But honestly, he can't cross a line because they can get rid. Because I'm telling you, the Murdoch brothers, they're not fans of him, But I'll tell you, he goes as far as he can, and I respect him for it. But at this point, he's starting to seem like he doesn't really care. But we just saw another MSNBC person come out and say that nobody believes us. And what are we doing at this point? The trust in media is so low. It's just, you would hope at some point, other than Tucker, people would come out and say, you know what, this isn't true. I saw like Zachariah, whatever his name is, from CNN. He came out and he said, I think this whole thing with the pronouns isn't good. I think we're dwelling on all this stuff too much. And like, he was slammed, and it's like, we need more. I just wish there were more brave people, but honestly, I think a lot of them are in contracts, just like everything that when people are talking about the conservatorship for Britney Spears, I was like, everyone in Hollywood has a conservatorship to some extent. And I think that a lot of these people, they're trapped, that they can only say so much. And if they cross the line, they will be ousted, they will be sued, and their lives will be destroyed.
Without a doubt. I know you're a busy gal, and it's a beautiful sunny day, so you probably have some things you want to do, and I don't want to take up your whole Friday, but I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's always a awesome discussion, and I love the fact that your show has blown up.
Yeah,
and but it's crazy, but it's not it's not surprising because you're outspoken, you're well researched, you're willing to talk. I mean, you're willing to come on to That Wanted with Greg Powell.
I know. We're like, nobody agrees with me. It's okay though. It's okay because it's funny. It's fun, and it's better that way to have all voices. But I really appreciate that, and I always appreciated getting to know all of you. I do shows with Jason Burmis once in a while. I love Charlie Robinson and all these voices that I met through there, and it's just such a good perspective because I'm not really on a side. People want to put you in boxes. I think it's all BS. I don't believe in the left and right. I don't believe in Republican, Democrat. I think we're all being played, and we've been played for a long time. And the best we can do is try to inform people of where they can, actually chip away at saving, gaining their freedom back or getting decentralized. That's a good thing about your show, is that at some point everyone meets at a place of, okay, so what are we going to do?
Yeah. Well,
and that's why I love your show. And yeah, my Rumble channel has been because when we got kicked off of YouTube, I didn't even plan for it. I know everyone was like, back up your stuff. I didn't even know what that meant. I'm like, I'm the worst tech person. So I lost everything. And I just have been really blessed by God that we were able to rebuild on Rumble as much as we did. But everyone's just got to keep fighting and keep showing up.
Yeah, I don't have I to talk to you about Matt from Content Safe, Raymer. He's awesome. He was another.
I need that content.
Yeah, well,
I didn't do anything to prepare for YouTube being shut down.
Well, what he did was, so you know who Richard Grove is from Grand Theft World podcasts, and
I've seen him. Yeah,
so Richard's awesome. He's a great guy. I've known him for a long time, and he hooked me up with Matt, who's actually a big fan of like alternative media and also a great tech mind, and he has a company to protect basically alternative media. It's called Content Safe. He owns a couple tech companies, but this is the one that I work with because it's exactly what I needed.
Oh, good. I got to check them out.
Yeah. So what he does, listen to that. So it makes your life so much easier. When I was still on YouTube, what I would do is I would upload to YouTube, and then my YouTube channel would sync with all my other channels. So my Rumble.
Oh, get out.
Minds, Odyssey, Rockfin, every single one of my channels. So I would only have to upload to one spot. I'd upload my thumbnails, my description in one spot, and then within 24 hours, it's available everywhere. And the point of that
I need that for sure.
It's obviously convenient, right? But it's also, the other thing was, one of the reasons for it was so it protected you. So if you got censored on one platform, it would still exist somewhere else. And so like with me, I'm on Band.video also. So like all I do is tell Matt, like, hey Matt, now I'm on Band.video. Here's all my information.
Oh wow.
And then he basically just syncs that in, and it's awesome service. So with audio podcasts, that's kind of how it works already. Like I put my audio, upload my audio, my thumbnail, my description on my host website on Podomatic is who I work with, and then I pay them for bandwidth and storage, and then they send that information, my RSS feed, to everybody, and then that's it. But with videos, it's like, it was always so
right. I didn't know that anything existed like that. I've been asking people. This is such good news. You always know before you everything that I've learned over the years. I usually heard first from you. That's not a joke. Because even like Rockfin, I never heard of to you. A lot of different things along the way. But I've been asking everyone, why isn't there one of these aggregators for video? I didn't know.
Yeah, he's great. And he does it, and now he's also working with IPFS. He's thinking about using that, which is kind of like this blockchain technology type thing. I'm not that smart with tech, so like I have a hard time understanding it too. But it kind of makes it so it's always going to exist somewhere. You back it up on IPFS, and then it always, and the whole purpose is like, we don't know which platform could be bought or sold.
Anytime.
Yeah, at any time. So like with me, I'll go on any platform. Like I'll go on, I'm like, I have a Minds account, a Rumble account. I have I'm everywhere. I'm even uploading my audio now to Substack also.
Oh, great.
The Substack, just because I'm like, the more places the merrier.
I agree.
And people have preferences. Like some people like the way Rockfin works. Some people prefer Odyssey or Rumble or BitChute. So it's like upload everywhere, but it saves you tons of time.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad that that's the best part is I have been looking for that. I couldn't believe it didn't exist, and it does.
Yeah.
You always have the good inside info. That's the truth.
Well, the cool thing is with networking with people, and I think people realize, like, and like you said, like, you might not agree with everybody, maybe not everybody agrees with you, but we're all on the same team. Like if you're one team, it's team people, right? It's
well, that's why I love you, the Unwanted, and I always like to do it, is because at the end of everyone having their own opinion, at some point everyone has to be like, okay, so we're screwed. What are we gonna do?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think most people like using labels, and like you were saying, like the D's and the R's and the blues and the red, like using labels is literally created to separate us. And it's like, if you say, hey, you know what, let's have a discussion, but let's not use any labels, let's not use any isms, let's just talk about ideas. Most of us will agree on things, and even if you don't agree with somebody, you won't look at them like they're the enemy. And that's what they do. It's like you basically it's the same thing they do with war, right? Like you make them look like the other, you make them you demonize them, because then it's easier to hate them and attack them, so the truth is, most of us, if we sit down and we have a discussion and we just hang out and talk about ideas, there's probably a lot we can agree with. And and the things we disagree with, we can at least understand where we came from. Like, it's like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I get, I understand your thinking. I understand your perspective. It's not because you're evil. It's not because you're this bad person. It's just because this is your philosophy. This is your logic.
And you're informed by your experience, and what people don't know, they don't know. And at the same time, and that's the most important thing. I think that's the most important thing in general, and also especially for what's happening with our children, is you don't have to pick a group. I think this whole thing about picking, your cause or your group or whatever it is, it really divides you from the inside out. You're really doing it. A lot of things that you're doing and thinking are more informed by the group. And that's another thing that I think is really part of it. They've told us all that, like, diversity and all of this is what makes us great. And I honestly think the morals, values, like I said, most people just want to live their lives, do their thing, raise their kids, go to be left alone. The government should be protecting our country and doing this and that. I think we should get rid of the Fed and take back our own bank. But whatever the case may be, I really think that the best thing we can do is really go back to valuing our individual spirit and being individuals, because this whole group think thing, all the way from the parties to the whatever your cause is, I think it's meant to divide. I think our strength is really what we do have in common, and that's what I always find with your crew, when I'm like the only conservative on there, even though I'm really just, I don't even know what I am at this point. I don't believe any of it. But the truth is that I do think the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are basically like as good as it gets in terms of protecting humanity. But for me, it's really, let's have the conversations. Nobody's evil. If anyone's evil, they're certainly not showing up to have a conversation, because they already believe what they believe.
Yeah, and see, and there are some conservatives that go on, and you don't want to. A lot of libertarian people would absolutely relate more to a conservative perspective than the crazy liberal. I think that's the thing about, like, moderate liberals and conservatives and libertarians. Like, we all agree that the progressives and the extreme liberals have lost their mind, and that's kind of what, like, we're just like, you're going way over the, like, there's just some things you can't even justify. The crazy thing is, right, like, some of the really extreme left, who is like all about opening borders to everyone all the time, I feel like that could be used against them, because you think about it, what people don't realize is that a lot of like I said, I have some employees that Guatemalan, I have friends that are Mexican, I have friends that are from El Salvador. They're very conservative. Like, they're not like it's like they try to grab their vote and grab their like convince them that that party is for them. But when you start dissecting their views, like they're very like two of my employees that are from Guatemala, they're I mean they go to church every Sunday. They're
Yeah.
very family oriented. Like I'm you know, they both come from big families. They love having big families. You know, they're very you know they don't get caught up in nonsense. They think family values is one of the most important things.
Right.
Being spiritual or religious or having some type of moral compass is very important. They're very traditional with their values and their worldview. And so it's like I'm like, wait, you know, it's funny because the Democratic Party tells you that you vote for them because you know you're going to agree with them and they're going to fight for you, but your values actually are more red than blue, and it's like, you know, I'm kind of surprised that the conservative perspective hasn't utilized that, you
I
know.
think they are now. I think they are now, especially it is the Hispanic community that is speaking out the most. I get the most about it, but even when we've been down at the border or talk to people from the border, which I try to keep up on, it is the Hispanic communities down there that are livid because the other thing that they're not telling you is that a lot of the people that are coming through the border are coming through and they're ending up in slave situations. They're ending up, they work for the cartels own them. It is not what it seems down there. And also I have a friend on, Christy, who does a lot of stuff at the border and the stuff she finds, but it's a giant business what's going on down there at that border, and there's nothing humane about it. It really is a huge money laundering, child trafficking, human trafficking, but it's a gun and drug ring down there, and it is the Hispanic communities that are taking the brunt of it, and they've had it. They just do not want this. This is not what they signed up for. It's like the same thing I'm saying about this LGBTQ group that I have over here, that they say that they don't want it, that this transgender thing and pushing it with the schools and the kids, like that's not what they fought for. These people that came here legally, most of them, but that built these amazing Hispanic communities all over Texas and Arizona and New Mexico, and they're being inundated. And a lot of the people, they don't speak English, but they also aren't they're not that good in their own language. And a lot of these kids, 100,000 kids have disappeared into the interior without being traced or anything. Where are they going? So I just think that it's the Hispanic community that's getting the brunt of it. And I think we'll see a lot of big moves coming up for that community, especially because a lot of them, they have traditional family values. They're Christian. They don't want that happening to their children in school either. And you know, and they're seeing what's happening, and it's not humane. It's not humane what's happening at that border.
There are also a lot of them almost seem to appreciate America more than Americans in regards to like you know, coming from maybe a poor situation back at home and then come to America and be like, oh, okay, like here I have a little bit more freedom. I have a little bit, you know, like they appreciate some of those values. It's funny because during the Iraq War, I was very skeptical of nationalism and being patriotic because I'm like, oh, I can see how this can be a tool for the elite. Like you just say, hey, you know, screw those people, we're the best, let's go invade them. But and then you see like during 2020, like how it became a good thing because it's like these are the people who believe in, you know, states' rights, who believes in like, and the reason why state rights are so important, like you were saying, is because if I don't like this one state, and you know, I can go to another state that has more of my values, and so corruption is much less, and you know, there's not just like a monarchy or a dictatorship where like you talk to people from other countries and they're like, whatever our president or prime minister said was the regulations, that's what goes. Like we don't have anywhere else to run to. Like if I'm in Canada and, you know, that dictator says, hey, this is, you know, everybody has to wear a mask, everybody wears a mask. Where in the US, because states have their own rights, I could be like, you know what, screw this blue, you know, state.
Right.
To Florida, or I'm going to go to Texas, or I'm going to go to one of the Carolinas, or wherever it may be. It's like, so we have that freedom. So the in theory, the idea that they were, you know, on having state rights to kind of prevent, you know, just, you know, a monarchy or like I said, a dictator kind of just controlling everything. was great, and like
We
most.
should take them back. We should reestablish pride in your state. Like I was telling you, every state is its own personality. If we did that, if we got good governors in every state and really like got out the uniparty and the swamp from each state and started there and really started putting in people who love God and country and America and our children and want, to go back to the values and to the, the Bill of Rights and all the things that, make America the freest, safest, and put back in law and order and everything. We could actually also, every state could, if they were being legitimate and weren't a lot of this contract stuff and this bribery and blackmail, all that, if we actually could get rid of a lot of corruption and each state could balance their books, I bet you every state could probably, if they did it right, run on their own dime. And then that's a really good way to pull the federal powers over everyone back to where they're in check. Because right now, every state, especially during the PPP loans and the CARES Act, these people are taking money from DC. It is at a cost. And, that's another thing. We really have to start, I think, whichever state you're in, start valuing that state and wanting that state to be, corruption free and as transparent and get rid of as many swamp creatures and uniparty people and people that have all these crazy contracts that go into city council, which is like $100,000 a year job, and come out as multimillionaires. And you don't know, it's not that hard to figure out. But I think that we do really well if we actually took the fact that we are a constitutional republic and every state has its own borders, language, culture of its own state. If we took that back, we could really redefine what DC is and make it work for us rather than make it, honestly, a albatross over every state's head. Because once you take money from DC, their hooks are in, and every state right now really should be working on cleaning that out.
Absolutely, absolutely. So people listening, be proactive. Get involved, go to your meetings, your local meetings, run locally, get involved, be outspoken, because the common theme that people learned during 2020 and so on was that a lot of crazy people have power locally, and we've been kind of neglecting that. So
yeah, and don't just vote right or left, Democrat, Republican. Look at who you're voting for. Make sure you feel like your vote with your name on it matters, and that what matters is that you aren't voting for anyone that you don't know exactly who you're voting for. Because a big way to get through this is to realize that this massive amounts of money going in, or so that there's a block, so that your vote doesn't matter. But make your vote matter, at least for you. It's it's what you can do as an individual to start. So I agree with you for the local situation. Very important.
Awesome. Well, thank you
so much for having me. It's always fun. I always learn stuff from you. So I really appreciate it every time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining me. I'll get you that information for Matt from
Great. Oh yeah, I need that.
And
Cool.
yeah, I'll introduce you. He's awesome.
Great.
And keep up the great work. I mean, you do some amazing shows. I was just listening to actually on the way home from work your recent interview with the journalist from the Epoch Times, which was really informative.
Oh yeah, Joshua.
Yeah,
He's great. He has a documentary coming out about January 6th, and you have great guests too. I sometimes look and I think, who's on his show? Probably need them too. So awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll see you soon. Thank you for everything that you do for everyone, especially all the organization for Union of the Unwanted. I think it made a great model for getting people meeting in the middle. So I really appreciate that too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.
You too. Thanks. Bye.